could look at the shoulder, and let's say that we want to, just an example, like open up shoulder flexion, right? We want to increase the range. So we'll start passively stretching there, and then we'll start to add some intensity. We'll go into like some shoulder cars in that position and build up the mechanoreceptors. And then, we'll go into some end range liftoffs or pails rails, which would be like, some high intensity PNF work in that position. And then maybe you go into intensifying exercises like straight arm pullovers, right? And you build intensity there. So yeah, your strength work really, it should be synonymous and in parallel with your fortification or prehab work.
Welcome to the In an Athlete podcast. I'm your host, Trent, and this is the show where we dive into all things youth athlete development, strength and conditioning, and the mindset needed to thrive on and off the field. Whether you're a parent looking to support your child's athletic journey, a coach seeking fresh insights, or an athlete ready to take your game to the next level, you're in the right place. Before we jump in, make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated on our latest episodes. If you enjoy the show, please give us a like, share it with your friends, and help us reach even more people who can benefit from these insights. Together, we can empower the next generation of athletes to perform at their best. Now, let's get into it.
Welcome back to the In Athlete podcast. I have another special guest. It is 5 a.m. currently in Melbourne, and it is, 1 p.m., 12 p.m.?
Yeah, it's noon. Yep.
It's noon in Wisconsin. I've got Coach Billy here from Wisconsin Badgers, who is one of the strength and conditioning coaches at Wisconsin, primarily working with wrestling and swimming, but we'll primarily be talking about swimming because this is what the podcast is going to be about today. But first of all, Billy, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome. For those who don't know, Billy and I first met in 2012 when I was interning at Wisconsin, and I know at the time you're learning about PRI as well.
Yep.
All the breathing and the kinematics of the rib cage and whatnot. And then had an amazing experience working with a lot of your athletes. I know with Kevin's athletes and some of the other sports as well. So today's episode is going to be more focused on swimming specifically. And first of all, before we get into that, do you just want to highlight a bit of your background and then we'll get into it?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess like on the educational side of things, I did my undergraduate at UW-Oshkosh, small school here in Wisconsin. From there, did my graduate work at the U in Minnesota. I had the opportunity to work with some awesome coaches throughout that time. The strength coach at UW-Oshkosh, Steve Brown, underrated D3 coach. He was an incredible resource. I actually came here and interned. It would have been like 2010 or 11. Worked with Jim Snyder over at the Cole Center. He was hockey then. He's with Buckets now. And then when I was at the U, I had the opportunity to work with Cal Dietz. So I've had some pretty awesome mentors as I came up in the field. And then I was hired here actually like right around the time that you were interning with us. 2012, the end of 2012 is when I was hired on full-time on staff. And I've been kicking it here ever since. I guess on the training side of things, I've dabbled in a lot. I've done like the traditional training. I've competed in powerlifting, competed in CrossFit. So I kind of pull from a lot of different modalities and methods and really just enjoy training in general. So.
Yeah, it's the perfect environment.
Yeah. Yep.
Cool. And let's go through like the specific physical demands. So I have a philosophy when it comes to training. No sport is inherently special, but there's unique features about each sport specifically. So we can always use, some elements of track and field, put that into swimming and whatnot. So What are some of the unique physical demands of competitive swimming, especially at the collegiate level?
Yeah, swimming is really weird. I've had an opportunity, I think work with almost every sport at this point throughout my career. And swimming just offers this super unique thing to tackle, when it comes to programming, because obviously it's a vertical displacement relative to the wall, but then you have to think about drag. So there is this like inherent load. It's these ridiculously long levers that you're trying to propel yourself with. And then you also have to deal with gravity, pushing you down to the bottom of the pool. So it's this really weird, unique sport. So I think it definitely requires some unique approaches, methods, means exercises to try to have some task relevance to swimming. But I think like you had mentioned, I definitely have this overarching theme or system to my programming. But as you progress through that, like the uniqueness of swimming definitely requires some different and unique methods.
Yeah, and I noticed with the swimmers at Melbourne Swimming Club is a lot of it, like we do a lot of jump training, and that's probably one of the things we've seen so much with our younger kids really develop is just, teaching them proper jumping mechanics.
Yep.
Just starting from there, just doing hurdle jumps, just non-counter movement styles and building to counter movement, because a lot of them, what I tend to see is because they're so, dorset, so plantar flex with the foot, like that ankle range of motion is really
Big time.
really
Yeah.
good. So they have the massive ability to dorsiflex, but that have lack of ability to dorsiflex, so bring their toes up towards their shins, but they can plantar flex like crazy. So I talk to the kids and it's like, hey, we need to improve this quality because it's going to help you with this with the turns. It's like, when you break down the turn, it looks like a squatting position.
Yep.
When
Big time.
When they start to see that position, it's like, all right, now it makes sense of why we're doing non-counter movement jump styles or, broad jumps, weighted jumps. And then it starts to make sense for these kids. And that's what I've seen is like the biggest buy-in from that perspective of, that people think swimming is, like I said, special inherently. But really there's elements of the weight room that we can actually add into to help them with these physical qualities for swimming.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think what you're talking about right there, that's 2 out of 3 main components that I feel like we can affect, right? Is the start, whether it's on the blocks or backstroke start on the wall, your flip turn, which are 2 deep squat, propel yourselves with your legs in a knee over toe position. And then there's obviously the stroke, which is obviously a little bit different. Like you talked about active, that whip of plantar flexion, but yeah, just generally being able to, like, can you squat properly? Like, can you maintain an upright torso in these positions? Can you dorsiflex your ankle? Because most of the kids can come in and they can't. So yeah, that's a huge component.
Yeah. And then how do you go about like screening a lot of these kids when they first come in? So you've obviously got your freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, and obviously they progress throughout that time. What do you see with the freshmen when they come in? So obviously they're 17, 18 years old, and then what's the actual progression and how you see them move forward?
Yeah, for sure. No, we run it back every year. So I'll have, even like Beta, who's been with me for like 8 years, every time we reset or have a little bit of a break and then kind of reset the training or competition timeline, at the start of that first macro, we'll reset everybody's positions, regardless of you've been doing it with me for 4 years or if you're an incoming freshman, because I feel like these are qualities that we can always get better at. But then also when the training volume is so high as we peak or taper in the weight room for the biggest competitions, we'll definitely start to lose or regress some of those inherent qualities. So when you're resetting in GPP1, that kind of off season or transition from the postseason time, I'm resetting everybody and making sure we have all of these general qualities. Like, can your ankle function like an ankle should for a general human, right? There's obviously different qualities as we progress for swimming specifically, but in that GPP timeframe, I'm taking everybody back.
Yeah, and I'm the same as well, especially in that off-season period when you've got more time. You can put them through, that, 4 to 8 week block of resetting those specific qualities that you want to achieve. Because I find that the sport, once you reduce those qualities, the sport itself limits that over time. So you're basically trying to restore that specifically, and then you can start to overload them.
Yep, I agree.
Cool. And then what's the swimming calendar, the competition calendar like as well? Because it's different from what we have here. How does it work over there? Obviously, you'll have like your minor meets, and then you'll have like your bigger meets. And how do you kind of taper them moving forward?
Yeah, so we kind of run it like two separate seasons, short course and long course. So like our NCAA season will be like November-ish all the way through March. And then any kids going on to any like international stuff, any junior teams, national teams, worlds, if it's an Olympic cycle, that international long course season. So we'll kind of run it in 2 separate blocks. That's kind of how we break it down. If you're looking at 2 like primary competitive timelines within the year.
Yeah, so it's pretty similar to here as well. Usually our long course season's a little bit longer, just the way it's structured out with all the qualifying meets, for states and nationals that come with it. And then, usually there'll be every 4 years with the Olympic trials, and they'll pop up, and then a few kids will actually get invited to that or qualify for that.
Yeah, we have very few, I guess, within those 2 separate competitive timelines, like meets that we are truly tapering for. Like in the system, like, man, we're basically training through the vast majority all the way through Big Tens. We'll like mini taper, mini peak going into some sort of mid-season meet, whatever it is for that year. But then, yeah, we're basically training straight through all the way through Big Tens. And that's like the true taper, take it back up a little bit for NCs, and then it'll go right into long course season for some of the kids.
Cool. And then how do you balance the S&C and then the swimming schedule on a weekly basis? Like, how does that work, and classes?
Yeah, no, that's definitely, one of the things to take into account in the collegiate setting in America is the context that you're working within. I think should probably be the biggest dictator of what the microcycle or weekly layout looks like. So I lean pretty heavily on my coaches. My coaches do a great job of communicating what the focus or emphasis of the training is in each micro and meso as we progress through. So I kind of know where they're more aerobic, like down days will be, like they use colors to associate with intensities. But, whether it's a high quality, high power day, if it's resisted, they're doing buckets, it's going to be a ton of underwaters, or they're using fins, whatever it may be. So they have their weekly layout, and then I can kind of backfill in conversation with them what we want our training load to undulate like in the weight room. So like, to give you an example, right now in the weight room, Mondays and Fridays would be like kind of our higher days in here. Wednesdays will be a lower day for most of the kids. Little caveat to that is as we progress, like this time of year right now, our distance swimmers are coming out on those Wednesdays so that their water training load can continue to rise. My training load goes down. And then our sprint men are on a little bit different scenario. So they're going Mondays, Fridays high with me, and they're running like a high intensity but really low volume Tuesday, Thursday mornings to kind of potentiate straight into water their high speed sessions. So it kind of depends on the coach, on the distance, what that training load is going to look like. But it all comes down to the way that the coaches are going to undulate their intensities and volumes throughout the week. And then we can backfill in how we see it fitting the best.
Yeah. Then how do you go about, making it a little bit more unique based on the distances and the strokes of the individuals with their training programs?
Yeah, so I've done it 2 ways. I've had it a different program just for distance, mid, and then sprinters. But I found it hard to quantify objectively like the training load within those, and to like meaningfully change it in practices. So now I've kind of brought it all together, and I have everyone on a very similar outline, and then we just undulate it within those different groups I talked about. So the men's sprinters, their layout's a little bit different, and then the distance cats, their stuff is also a little bit different. But on the sessions in here with me, everyone's kind of on the same outline, so it's easier for me to objectively quantify the workload to tell the coaches what this progression is going to look like.
Yeah. And then do you use any form of like subjective feedback in order to kind of like, like for example, at Melbourne Swimming, we use Bridge Athletic as our platform for training, and then also for like well-being. So we get them to fill in a survey before they start training in the gym, and that information is actually relayed to the coaches later on when they swim straight after their gym session, and then they can modulate their the intensity based on how they're actually feeling. So whether they're feeling like a 4 overall, do we need to take them back, or do they need to cut their session in half, or do they need to go home and rest? Are you using any form of like subjective feedback in order to modulate the training load?
So currently right now we're not. We've tried it in the past, but I think we've kind of fallen into a pretty good groove where it's almost just a conversation point between the athletes and myself, the athletes and the coaches, and myself and the coaches. And we've fallen into a pretty good groove with that. I will say though, as we get closer to Big Tens and NCAAs or whatever the international meets are, long course stuff that we're peaking and tapering for, we'll use just some simple objective work. So we'll go just for nervous system readiness, we'll go counter movement jump and the hand dynamo. And then we'll go HRV and CO2 tolerance. So those are the 4 metrics that I'll use in track. And then it just gives me some really easy objective points that I can communicate to the coaches as we go through that kind of tapering peaking scenario.
Yeah, we do the same thing where we do counter movement as part of our, with that 7 to 10 day window of main competitions, just to see if they're actually ready or, if they're still cooked as well.
Yeah.
That's good. And then are you doing any, I guess as the S&C coaches, we really hate this term, is injury prevention. I guess training in itself is inherently injury prevention, hence why they're in the gym. Mm-hmm. Is there anything unique or specific that you're doing that you're incorporating into their programs that would be considered injury prevention?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a big part of it. So I guess twofold on that. I think the 2 biggest areas that I try to emphasize for like injury prevention and reduction, like structural integrity, are shoulders and then the back, right? The way they articulate their spine, dude, is so crazy to me. Like Phoebe just sent me some videos of her underwaters because I was comparing them to betas to look for differences. And just the way that they articulate their spine on their underwaters will never, it always amazes me. It's so crazy how they move. So the back, because that is inherently not how we are meant to move, otherwise we'd be fish. We definitely have to fortify that in a very specific way. And then obviously the shoulders with the volume that they're using to train is craziness. So I guess around those, particularly at the shoulder, the system that I run, and it's more or less like, am I checking all these boxes? It's like a feedback loop for myself to make sure that I am. I'll start with the core and breath work, all those things combined, because I think that's going to lay a good groundwork for your ribs and your scapula to sit. And then T-spine extension rotation, and then all the movements of the scapula, elevation, depression, retraction, protraction, upward rotation, down rotation, anterior tilt, posterior tilt. Am I checking all of those boxes? And then just simple cuff work in all of the different positions. If I'm checking those boxes in my programming, I'm usually pretty happy with the results as far as fortification goes. But then I'm also running like a range of strength, or range of like intensification progression. So in that GPP model that we were talking about, when I take everybody back, I start with passive range work when everybody gets back. So we start with passive stretching, durational stretching, the analgesic effect, try to down regulate the stretch reserve a little bit, start to open up ranges. And then I just follow an intensification process as I go through that. So usually that meets like as we're peaking tapering we've developed a range, we can display strength and force over that range, maybe start to turn it into some reflexive work at range if it's warranted, and progress that. And I found that those things, like having your system for each, joint or tissue that you're trying to prehab or fortify, but then also having this structural integrity progression that is a long-term progression, it seems to work well. And, knock on wood, we've been, pretty durable. So that seems to work pretty well for us.
Cool. Yeah, because it basically sounds like the injury prevention is just inherently inbuilt anyways into the actual structure.
100%. Yeah. So like you could look at the shoulder, and let's say that we want to, just an example, like open up shoulder flexion, right? We want to increase the range. So we'll start passively stretching there. And then we'll start to add some intensity. We'll go into like some shoulder cars in that position and build up the mechanoreceptors. And then, we'll go into some end range liftoffs or Pales rails, which would be like, some high intensity PNF work in that position. And then maybe you go into intensifying exercises like straight arm pullovers, right? And you build intensity there. So yeah, your strength work really, it should be synonymous and in parallel with your fortification or prehab work.
That's a wrap for part 1 of this episode on the Inner Athlete podcast. We've covered some incredible insights today, but there's still so much more to come. Make sure to tune in to part 2 for the rest of the conversation. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, give us a like, and share it with your network to help us reach even more listeners like you. Thanks for joining me, and I'll catch you in part 2.